Coming up on Maine Challenge, Mark Seitz from the Maine Association of Letter Carriers. Hello, and welcome to Maine Challenge, a production of Lincoln County Indivisible and Lincoln County Television. Our guest today is Mark Seitz of the Maine State Association of Letter Carriers. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Chuck. Appreciate the invite.
Glad to have you here. There's a lot going on. Just full disclosure, my wife, who is retired after 32 years with the Postal Service, and my son is a mail carrier in Rockland, so we're in the family.
Nice. Is that Casey?
Yes.
Yep, I know him.
You know Casey, okay.
I do, yeah.
Well, he had a long day at work today. He tells me that it's a very it has been very stressful for some time, but it's much more so now. And we have to assume that it's because of the changes that have been set upon the service by the Postmaster General DeJoy and more than likely his boss, Mr. Trump. Any comments that you have from your perspective on it?
Well, it started with obviously the whole COVID pandemic. That's kind of put the strain on everybody at the Postal Service since March. We haven't stopped production. Carriers and all the other postal employees have continued to work without a break. Just their normal jobs, their normal days. Nothing's changed for us. The letter and flat volume are a little bit lighter. The parcels, everybody stays at home. Everybody's ordering stuff online, so that's kind of through the roof for us. So that's kind of added a little bit extra time besides all the extra precautions we have to use for COVID. It takes a little bit longer to deliver 40 or 50 extra parcels on your route than it would say 100 or 200 letters. So it's extending time out for carriers, at least on the street. Some still work, depending on the office, up to 12 hours a day at times. But yeah, a lot of the changes recently have come out. They've taken a couple of machines out of the Scarborough plants, letter sorting machines. They went from 10 machines to 8 machines. And I think I saw that there was about 671 nationwide. A couple other things the Postmaster General has done. He's kind of put more of a timeline, deadline type stuff on processing. If you don't hit this deadline, then we're not moving mail, we're going to leave it, we're just going to continue. The APWU president came out last week, Scott Adams, in the Portland Press Herald. There was somewhere around 80,000 letters left behind at the Scarborough plant, just simply because one truck was 10 minutes late. And that's a lot of letters left behind for what could conceivably be 10 minutes, which may or may not be made up on the street. If he's going to 14 different offices, it may take him, he might make up the 10 minutes just going to the offices themselves if there's no traffic, something like that. So that's put a delay on things as well, especially coming into election season. If we're leaving 80,000 letters behind a day, who knows how many could be ballots. And if there's ballots left behind and it might be the last day of the election, all of a sudden those could possibly tend to be ballots that might not get counted. So that could be an issue going forward. Some of the other rules they've put into place, they've tried to limit overtime. In Maine, it hasn't been too bad yet. I've heard different parts of the country that have been more strict on that, and they've left a lot more mail at the office, and it's more of a, we'll get it tomorrow, and I think there was a story in Wisconsin today about letter carriers just kind of banded together and said, no, we're staying and we're delivering that mail. We don't want that mail left behind. We care more about the mail than disobeying your order because we got to get these people their mail. So that's happening. I know
that in my son's office, they were shorthanded before all this started. So he was working overtime, and the boss didn't like overtime, of course. But he was doing not only his route, but packaging up or setting up other routes and helping other carriers. And it was just clearly on overload and stress before Henry DeJoy came in and started having all his fun. And so it's in a tough situation, and everybody's concerned about the ballots, of course, and the packages. But there's also the issue of just worker overtime and stress on the employees. And I've always had a great impression, even before I married a postal worker, I always had a great impression of, I mean, when I grew up in New Jersey, I know we're supposed to be you talking, but I want to tell this story.
That's okay.
Where I grew up in New Jersey, in a small town in northern New Jersey, the mailman, I remember him very well. His name was Ben, and he was such a critical part of the neighborhood, of the community. He knew if somebody was sick, and he spread the word that somebody needed help, or a cat was missing, or a dog was loose, or whatever it was. Ben was a fabric of that neighborhood, and everybody liked him, and everybody talked to him. So I grew up with a very positive impression of the mail service, and watching what's going on with the employees now, there's no way they can be that way, because there's too much pressure on them. Are you seeing that all over the state of Maine?
Oh yeah, the city carriers are the most micromanaged craft in the entire postal service. We wear a GPS tracker on us. Yeah, no, so they watch us around the clock. They put GPS on us. They watch the little dots on the computer at the office. 10 minutes behind, 10 minutes ahead. They'll constantly contact us and send messages through our scanner. So there's a lot of pressure to do the job as quickly as possible, always knowing somebody is watching you. So it is, to me, I think the craft that's the most picked on and most watched of any of the craft employees.
It's great for morale, I'm sure.
No, yeah.
Reminds me of a sign a friend of mine had on a cruise boat that he ran. It said, "Beatings will continue until morale improves."
Yeah.
It's like, how much can you take? How much can somebody take?
It almost feels like that, yeah. But going back to what you were saying before about the staffing, the city carrier craft is the one craft in the Postal Service that has not been automated. Clerks, mail handlers, a lot of those positions with the machines, they've been able to automate them over time. City carrier craft, you can't automate. So our craft numbers have grown. There's over 1 million deliveries per year that are added in this country. So the amount of deliveries in ground that we have to cover continues to grow and grow and grow. So the Postal Service has continued to try to hire, and they've had an issue with the staffing. The ratio or the turnover rate for the new hires, they're called city carrier assistants, since 2013 is a 70% turnover rate. So it is very difficult to hire and maintain these employees and to keep them on board. And that has caused the issue with staffing. Typically in the summertime is the usual high vacation time. So you get about 10% of the carriers off on vacation. The whole COVID thing where everybody wants to be home if they're sick, or if they're quarantined, or if they have daycare issues.
And you want them to be home.
15% of the people off right now because of that. So you're looking at only about 75% attendance right now with most postal employees. So that, coupled with the extra time it's taking on the street and the extra parcels, it's just adding to, your typical 8-hour day a carrier might have on their route, an 8-hour day. They're all working 10 hours. Now, if you're on the overtime list, you're easily working 12 hours a day, 60, 70 hours a week, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Now we deliver 7 days a week. So there are carriers that have worked upwards of 20 to 30 days in a row. So it has been very, very strenuous on city carriers right now.
And the Postal Service also provides the last mile service to UPS and possibly FedEx. Am I right?
Both. We deliver, I think, somewhere around the 20 to 30% for each company, 20 to 30% of their parcels. I'd add to it about, I think 3 or 4 weeks ago, both FedEx and UPS told Amazon, they gave them a cut and says, all right, we're only handling these amount of packages and we're not handling any more. And Amazon just redirected it towards us. And then one day, all of a sudden, we have thousands and thousands of extra parcels that we weren't expecting because they cut them off. The Postal Service isn't going to cut anybody off. So that just put more, our parcels are probably 3 times what they normally are at this time of year.
Wow. Now, speaking, you mentioned equipment, and it's very alarming to hear that these letter sorting machines all around the country are being taken out of service and in some cases destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed that the vehicle equipment looks pretty tired, and some of it clearly needs either upgrading or replacement. Is that happening on a decent schedule?
So our the box metal trucks, the LLVs that you see on the street, most of those were produced in the mid to late 80s with a shelf life expectancy of 15 years. So we're about 15 years late on getting new vehicles. Then they don't make them anymore. They don't make the parts for them anymore. When they break down, they basically put them aside and keep the spare parts for when the next one breaks down. They have put a few new vehicles into the fleet. They've been talking about a new vehicle fleet, but they need 200,000 plus vehicles. So you're looking at a $5 to $6 billion cost to the Postal Service. So they've had about 4 years ago, they started putting out offers for people to vote or bid on making the vehicles, and they're at the stage now where they were down to 4, and the Postal Service a couple months ago was about to pick one of them to start making the vehicles, and they've kind of been delayed. I'm not sure if it's COVID or the money with the stimulus or the Postal Service and all that, but they've been it's been delayed. But yes, there's probably, I'd say, 4 or 5 vehicles per year right now that just spontaneously combust.
That's good for health of employees too.
No, yeah. Or the mail. Sometimes, a lot of times the carrier is able to save the mail, but not always.
Yeah, I overheard an argument or a discussion recently where someone was trying to make the case, and I'm not the one to try to make this case because I'm opposed to the idea, but that if business was allowed to take it over for profit, that privatization would be the solution for the post office. Do you have an opinion on that? I do.
Well, yeah. So operationally, the Postal Service has made money almost every year, except for the first year of the financial crisis in I think it was 08, I believe. And then this year, because of COVID-related costs, the Postal Service has operated at a profit. Last year, they reported, I think, a $4.2 billion loss, but operationally, they made $900 million. I think in 2016, they made $1.3 billion. The loss is directly related to the 2006 Postal Accountability and Re-Enhancement Act, which made the Postal Service pre-fund future retiree health benefit premiums 75 years into the future. And they wanted us to pay 80% of it the first 10 years. So we were paying somewhere between $5.1 and $5.5 billion a year. The first, I think we paid it for 9 years, something like that, until we kind of ran out of money. At the time, in the early 2000s, the Postal Service was making billions and billions of dollars. It was running fine. I think the government saw this as a way to get some. So they put this forward for us. I mean, you think about it, 75 years in the future, this retiree health benefit premiums are for people that aren't even born yet. Their grandkids aren't even born yet. And it's just going to be sitting in an account that nobody can touch for 75 years, except that it's not. It's actually been borrowed against, and there's no money in that account. There should be $55 billion on paper, but there's no money in the account because the government's borrowed it all.
Just like Social Security. Do I understand correctly that Senator Collins was involved as an original sponsor of that bill in 2006?
Yes.
So her talk during this campaign of helping the Postal Service is not exactly accurate.
Yeah, she has not been a great advocate. She's put some stuff out there, but we've tried to end that pre-funding for years. It was passed in the Congress early this year. The Postal Service, after that 2008 hit, they paid it the first couple of years, no problem. After about 9 years, they had $55 billion in that account. The Postal Service said, yeah, we can't afford to do that anymore. But so on paper, it still looks like they're losing money. And that's what it makes it look like they're losing money. But operationally, they're still making money. But that pre-fund is the only thing causing us to make money. And that pre-fund was very poorly written at the time. So it wanted us to pay the 80% in the first 10 years, but there was some stuff in there about amortization. So even after the first 10 years, it kept going. So even now, 14 years later, it's still saying that we owe $5 billion a year. And there
Which is impossible.
No provisions.
It can't be done. That's
impossible. There were no provisions or something that says, well, if you made this amount of money, you only have to pay this or a percentage or anything like that. I mean, it doesn't make sense because nobody else pays it anyway. The Postal Service right now and before that just pays the retiree health benefit premiums yearly as it is, just like every other government agency. They just say, okay, OPM says, well, how much money is it? And the Postal Service pays the money, and they do that now. So they're still paying the 75 years into the future premium as well as this year's premium or next year's premium. I'm not sure if they pay the same year or the year ahead. So they're still paying that as we go along. So when the 75-year mark hits, I guess then we don't pay it for 75 years. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Now, does the National Association of Letter Carriers have a contract coming up that is subject to some negotiation currently?
Yeah, so there are 4 major unions within the Postal Service. There's the NALC, National Association of Letter Carriers. The rural carriers have the National Rural Letter Carriers Association. The mail handlers are the Mail Handlers Association. And then the APWU covers clerks, custodians, janitors, and truck drivers. All 4 usually ended around the same time. The other 3 unions have already settled or went to arbitration, and theirs are all done. Our contract expired last September 25th. We were scheduled for mediation. We couldn't agree to a contract. And then in April, we were supposed to go to arbitration, kind of when COVID hit. So right now, we're tentatively scheduled for a September arbitration for our national agreement. And our national agreement would just continue until we either get a decision or an arbitration decision or something.
So the carriers are working without a contract, essentially.
I think the agreement is that it stays until
the old contract still applies until the new one takes effect.
Typically, it's not more than a year because I think there's some language about a year. But yes, it continues until a new one's negotiated. But this one is going to arbitration, so we probably won't get an answer until I'm guessing December or January.
Wow. Now, my mail carrier, I live in Thomaston, and my mail carrier, I get a smile from him or her sometimes every day. I know they're having a tough time. I know probably better than some because of my family connections. They still give me a smile. I get a smile, but I'm wondering every time they smile, and I don't want to slow them down or stop them and engage them in conversation, but how is morale overall? Are you all holding your own on the morale front, or is it are you really entering into some tough times?
No, I think I don't think morale is good. I think it all started with the pandemic, and it kind of was teetering a little bit. You have a whole bunch of different people with different opinions on the pandemic and what it means, and somehow it all became political. But then so you have people that want to wear masks and people that don't want to wear masks, and people want, so we have that issue with people kind of going against each other a little bit. But yeah, no, everybody's worried about the Postal Service. The White House came out earlier this year with the whole, we got to go after the Postal Service. We're talking about privatization. Most of the union contracts have a no layoff clause, but you have to be in 6 years. So a lot of the younger people are worried. This whole privatization thing, the new Postmaster General with all the stuff he's doing. One of the things he did a couple weeks ago, besides laying off and reassigning a lot of the top level executives at the Postal Service, was he basically split the Postal Service into 3 parts and said, okay, we're going to run it as a business, and these 3 different areas are going to be completely separate from each other. So some people, including myself, think that it was specifically done that way so the Postmaster General can say, well, this one piece here, we're not really doing very well financially, so we're going to split that piece off and privatize that one. And to break the Postal Service up into pieces would be a lot easier to privatize than if it was one whole piece. And I think that is part of the plan myself.
I don't feel like I'm supposed to get up on a soapbox, but I have to say that privatization is not a great idea, because if you take a service that is essentially operating on a budget, and now privatization takes 14 to 17% right off the top for corporate profits, and you have to make do with 85% or whatever it is of what you had for a budget. This is what we're seeing in prisons, where the private prisons are being run for profit, is that the profits come first and then the services, and services inevitably are cut. And also in prisons, services are inevitably inadequate. And I think that's probably true in the Postal Service too. So it can't get better. And then if you are operating on a profit, there's whole areas of the country that are just not going to be served, as UPS and FedEx are demonstrating. There are plenty of places in this country where you just can't get service. And they just dump those packages on the post office and hope for the best. And the post office does their job. Sorry, I'm giving a little speech here, but
that's okay. No, you're right. You're not going to be able to send a letter from Hawaii to Fort Kent for 55 cents through a private company. You're paying $40 or $50. I mean, it's going to be crazy. The biggest effect you're going to have if something like that happened is on the rural communities. And Maine has a very large section of rural community, and they're just not going to go there. I mean, FedEx and UPS still don't go to certain areas of the country. They give the packages or stuff to us to deliver for them because they know it's not profitable to go to these areas. And to privatize something like the Postal Service, those are the first things they're going to get rid of, is why are we going there? They're going to raise prices. They're going to reduce people's use in it, and they're not going to go to these rural areas. One of the things that I just read today was that the VA was having issues with their medicine getting to their people through the Postal Service. It's being delayed, and they're moving, or their plan is to move some of that stuff to FedEx and UPS, and we're going to lose business if we continue to do stuff like this, which probably is the plan, is to, if we start losing business, well, now we can cut this, and now we can cut that, and now we can cut this.
But aren't the taxpayers paying for that service of delivering medicines to veterans?
Well, I'm not sure.
It's going to raise the cost significantly of mailing packages and cause you to have to raise taxes. or not deliver the goods.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the VA pays for itself, but the Postal Service has run independently since 1972 based on postage alone. It's not asked for or received taxpayer money since 1972. That's almost a half a century. And if you put in the pre-funding that we talked about earlier, the Postal Service has actually given the government $55 billion and received nothing in return. And the stimulus bill that they're asking for now to get passed, they're asking for $25 billion in stimulus money for COVID-related issues, not anything to do with the election or balloting or anything like that. And if you really think about it, all we're doing is asking for about half the money that we already gave them back to us. I mean, it's ludicrous to think that, you know, they can bail out cruise lines that aren't even American cruise lines and airlines and all these things, but they can't take care of somebody that was able to be self-sufficient for 50 years. There's no other government agency that can be self-sufficient that doesn't take taxpayer dollars at all.
Right.
They've just pretty much, you know, in 1970 made the United States Postal Service and left them alone and says, okay, we don't have to worry about them anymore. There's no other agency that they can talk or say that about.
Well, our viewers are very lucky to get this slice of information from you, and I really appreciate your coming on. We're just about done. Mm-hmm. If you have a final thought, I'd welcome it. My final thought would be that the postal workers are not, their job is not to deliver information to the public, and you don't hear them doing that. So it's really helpful to get that information out there, and I wish we had more venues so that people could better understand what's going on at the Postal Service. But
yeah, no.
I thank you for coming on and for sharing your thoughts on Maine Challenge. And
I appreciate the offer.
Any final thoughts you have are welcome.
The only thing, like I said earlier, is the stimulus money, I think, is the only thing that we need right now. The $25 billion that the Postal Service is asking for, I think, is realistic. If you look at the first stimulus bill that was passed, the CARES Act, Family First Coronavirus Response Act, part of what's going on with the Postal Service was the Postal Service was the one business, government agency, whatever you want to call it, in the country that was exempt from paying or getting money back. So part of that first CARES Act was the 80 hours of emergency sick leave and up to 12 weeks of Family Medical Leave Act for employees with child care issues. So any other company in the country that qualified would pay their employees that, say to the government, hey, we paid our employees this, the government would give them the money back. The Postal Service was the one agency that was exempt. So they told the Postal Service they had to pay it, but we're not going to give you the money back. So that coupled with, you know, all the extra cleaning and issues that we've had to try to keep employees safe has caused the expenses to go way up. The revenue actually is slightly higher than it was at this time last year. The loss that we're feeling right now is completely 100% COVID pandemic related. And that's what we need the money for. And contact.
Thank you so much, yep. Mark Seitz from the Maine State Association of Letter Carriers. We appreciate you taking the time to join us, and keep the faith, fight the good fight, and keep on keeping on. We really appreciate the work that you and your fellow carriers and postal workers do for the state of Maine and for the people of the state of Maine. And once again, thank you for coming on Maine Challenge, a production of Lincoln County Indivisible and Lincoln County Television. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.